Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 184. Yes, it's week 184. So Adam is on his way in, and Jack has, I'll let him tee it up because he had a really good title for it. We're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff, including we just got an update from a commercial banker because I'm like, what is happening out there? And so I'll give you the rundown from Andrew Krasinski of Fifth Third Bank. I said, can I use your name? He goes, sure. Hopefully we won't get him in trouble. But if you guys have questions, hit us up with the Q&A. If you want to harass us in the chat, we're used to it after 184 weeks of this. We got to be thinking about our 200th week anniversary, Jack, because we had a lot of fun at VBGB, or actually the Hamilton, for our 100th week anniversary. So we're going to have to do that. And just so you know, we are going to take a break for next week because it's Thanksgiving. So Jack, tee this thing up because I loved what you'd said, but I'm going to screw it up.
No, that's fine. So a couple things. Thanks for letting me know we're off next week. I was going to ask you about that. So all good to know that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Andrew. So Andrew is the kind of person. So last time I asked him that question, like how are things are going, just generally speaking in the industry, he looked at me, he's like, okay, do you really want to know, or do you want like the elevator pitch? I'm like, no, I really want to know. And he will tell you exactly,
Yes.
like in great detail
Yes.
and technicalities and or technical details and everything else. So good that you were able to catch up with him to share some of his thinking on that. So yes, as I was going through thinking about what we might talk about today, because there's so much to talk about, and I was looking at the content, I was thinking that this is going to be a mashup between Weekend Update, Saturday Night Live Weekend Update, and Dumb Crook News. And so you'll see what I'm talking about when I start sharing some of these things, but it's things you've heard in the news, and just at this point you just not even suspending disbelief, because you just know, okay, some variation of it is probably true. So but we can go through that if you want me to just start right on into it.
Do it. I like
All right.
that.
Okay.
The Dumb
All
Crook
right.
News was just really funny. Weekend Update and Dumb Crook News. And,
Okay.
and all the politicians seem like they're all crooks. So
okay.
Anyway.
So first news story is about yesterday's meeting with President Biden and Chinese leader Jinping. And here's the article. It says they agreed Wednesday to resume military-to-military communications and cooperate on anti-drug policies, two tangible outcomes from their first face-to-face meeting in a year. But after 4 hours together, including a garden walk on the outskirts of San Francisco, the leaders and their teams separately made clear that the meeting itself was the message. Two economic and military superpowers will keep talking about issues that divide them. Two leaders agreed to pick up the phone and talk about the differences between them. Now, there was another quote in here that I wanted. Let's see. Oh, there it is. I found it. Okay. So same with different article talking about the discussion, and then it says, after rattling off a list of perceived agreements made with Chinese President Jinping, President Biden on Wednesday once again called his counterpart a dictator, a move that is likely to agitate already fraught relations between the two powerhouse economies. And here's the quote: "Look, he's a dictator in the sense that okay, that's weird. I'm like trying to do my Italian kind of inflate, like, look, he's a dictator." Biden doesn't talk like that, right? He's a dictator in the sense that he's a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that is based on a form of government totally different from ours. Okay, Captain Obvious, thank you so much for that. Do you think it's a good idea after 4 hours of talking to once again call the person standing next to you a dictator? So, I'm just like, all right. Now, next news story is that a Trump allied conservative, Senator Mullen, who is a Republican from Oklahoma, was ready to make things physical at a meeting. And it was the senators in both parties say that they were shocked when Mullen, a first-term senator and Trump ally, challenged the president of the Teamsters to a fistfight in the middle of a Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee hearing. And this is the best part, forcing the 82-year-old chair, Senator Bernie Sanders, to step in to keep blood from being spilled on his carpet. I mean, you can't. That's why I said I feel like I'm doing the Weekend Update skit, like telling you all this stuff. So, yeah, and
strange,
then
but true.
Absolutely, and then a little more serious as to what happened yesterday with kind of the holdout about government funding. So here's the headline on that. The Senate voted overwhelmingly Wednesday yesterday for legislation spearheaded by Speaker Mike Johnson to fund the government until early next year, wiping out the possibility that Congress will vote on another massive omnibus funding package before Christmas. The vote was 87-11, with 10 Republicans and 1 Democrat voting in opposition. Senate and House conservatives pledged that they would do everything in their power to avoid having another spending package right before Christmas and New Year's, something that has become a Washington tradition. And then they talked about a few of the things that are in there. The legislation that he would sign would fund military construction, VA issues, so veteran affairs issues, agriculture, transportation, housing, urban development, energy, and water. It would fund under DOD, other DOD, and other non-defense social programs through February. What it does not include is $105 billion in emergency spending requested by President Biden to fund the war in Ukraine, provide military aid to Israel, fund security measures for Indo-Pacific, provide humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza, and fund additional security measures along the U.S.-Mexico border. So, and it says, nevertheless, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer declared the passage of Johnson's funding stopgap a victory. So again, a matter of perspective, a matter of which channel you turn on your XM radio or watch on TV as to whether or not it was a victory or not. Now, this, I will just, in the full interest of disclosure, a lot of this information came from the publication The Hill. And, I'm not aware of the slant and bias of that particular publication because they are making fun of or being somewhat derogatory to both sides of the aisle. So I don't know, maybe you guys know which way they swing. So, but that's and Adam, you may have missed it, my entry into, or my sharing of Dumb Crook News and Weekend Update mashed together.
Yeah, if you saw the video of the Mullins thing, it was like hysterical, but at the same time you just think, you gotta be kidding me. But at the same time, I can't remember who it was, but at some point, so maybe I'll give out 2 of Jack's gift cards if somebody can do this without Googling. Like at some point pre-Civil War, there was a caning on the Senate floor, like somebody beat somebody else with a cane.
Really?
So there has been violence, but as far as I know, that was the only other time that there was some violence. So there you go.
So we got a question from Kirk, and I've done an SOS to 3 different bankers, and we'll see which one answers first. But the question is, first of all, good morning to you too. The Fed announced they are more and more confident about reducing interest rates by approximately 3% next year. Yes, no, when? Well, while we're waiting for that response, I'll give my little banker's update from Andrew Krasinski of Fifth Third. And to Jack's point, Andrew Krasinski is like Russell Hughes, who's been on our program here before too. Neither one of them are going to give you the politically correct, sanitized, vanilla, nothing. They are going to give you their opinion. Whether you agree with it or not, brace yourself. But what I like about both of those guys, they're very smart and they do think things through. So here are some facts, because I said, Andrew, what is happening? Like, what's the finger on the pulse of in the banking world. So here are some facts. He said credit card debt is rising. They are seeing some deterioration in small business on slow pay, for loans. HELOCs are holding, so home equity line of credit for anybody that doesn't know that. He said 40% of Americans make under 50 or $75,000 a year. They are struggling. The economists, and this gets to Kirk's question. 30 days ago, they were saying hard or soft landing, hitting the warning bells, but nobody was agreeing. Was it going to be hard? Is it going to be soft? And he goes, now they're thinking, well, we might avoid it. He said that was only 30 days ago. One other thing, middle market, as they describe it, is like above 40 million, seems to be holding strong. But his point was this new paradigm of uncertainty, like nobody, he said, we had before where 12, 18 months they're projecting out. He goes, now they aren't even willing to do 30 days. Well, then we also see that the US credit gets downgraded from stable to not good, or I can't remember the terms, but it was not a favorable move on the, full faith and credit of the United States. And a lot of it has to do with the economic uncertainties, the infighting, the political divide that just seems like the Grand Canyon, etc. So when I hear back from any of these guys that I went to 3 different banks with your question, Kirk, I will come and pop right back onto it. So there's that. We did get looks like some harassment in the chat, which is always good. Let's see what we got here. The senator was a former MMA fighter as well. Oh, Joe. Will Johns watched the full video. They both look like people that should not be serving others. Well, a lot of people in the seats of power are not serving others when they're becoming multi-millionaires making $170,000 a year. So they are serving themselves. My opinion. Let's see. Anything else on the Q&A? No. Oh, here we go. Regarding worldwide instability, does democracy with capitalism still have the advantage in innovation? It does seem more and more like the Iran, Russian, Chinese axis are prosecuting global agendas, undercutting democracy and government legitimacy in a move to support authoritarian, governments across the world. Once it is said that communism failed because there is no money in it, but it does seem the death of the Communist Party or that communism has greatly been exaggerated. Well, that's an interesting, I could see that.
That's a lot to unpack there. I just, thanks, Joe. I kind of would agree, but honestly, the benefits of a command economy is you can make decisions pretty quickly. The downside of a command economy is you get groupthink. So that's why there's not much innovation that truly comes out of those countries, generally speaking. So to answer that question, I don't think there's anything to worry about, maintaining the position at the top of the heap. And I apologize for hopping on late, Gary.
That's all right. That's all right.
You had said, hey, one thing to make sure to hit on were a positive thing, tax rate changes, and not in the wrong direction. So one of the benefits of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act when they did the rate changes is that some elements of it are indexed for inflation. So the way that works in the tax code now is that everybody on the call hopefully pretty familiar that we have a graduated tax bracket. So the lower you make, the lower the rate, and then every marginal dollar that you make is taxed at the new rate. So if somebody says, I'm in the highest tax bracket, well, you may be, but if you only made it into that high tax bracket by $1, only $1 is taxed at that rate. Everything else is taxed at a graduated rate preceding that. So what that means is, for example, the 0% tax bracket used to be up to $10,250. Now it's at $11,000. Hitting the top tier at 37%. Now you have to make $50,000 more to hit that top tier. So due to inflation, which sucks, I have not enjoyed inflation myself. But due to inflation, everybody effectively got a tax cut in some respects, because if you made more because you got, a raise as part of, the inflationary things that have happened around here in the US, it now just takes a little bit longer, for you to hit that next bracket on average by around 7 or 8%. So that is another way of getting to, you got a tax cut, all else being equal. You'll still pay the same effective rate on more money. Whereas if this was not in effect, you would pay more taxes on more money. So in other words, like if Gary made $100,000, his effective rate might be 20%. And then if Gary made $150,000 and there are no inflationary measures, his effective rate might be 24%. So Gary paid more tax, like real more. Not only did Gary pay more taxes, he paid more taxes at a higher rate. What's happening now is that Gary makes $100,000, same effective rate, 20% or 20%. Now he makes $150,000, his effective rate is still 20% due to the inflationary indexing. Thus, the actual taxes that he's paying are less than he would have paid had this not been a provision that was in place. I know that was a lot of geek. I'm channeling my best Jack here, Jack. So the other thing that happened too is they index for inflation the standard deduction that you can take, which for people that generally don't have a mortgage or don't have a ton of charitable contributions, that's what you take. That also went up, index for inflation. So overall that's generally positive news for taxpayers. To then hit to just a reminder of the negative, just keep on sounding the gong. If fights are breaking out in the Senate, and I don't know if Jack brought it up, but evidently there was an elbowing in the hallway of the House of Representatives between two Republicans. Kevin McCarthy and one of the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's a guy that voted against him. Like literally elbowed him and shoved him into an NPR reporter. And then they chased each other down the hall. That's from the same party that's supposed to be for reducing my taxes. I just find it really unlikely that anything good's going to happen when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires in 2026. So it's just another way of saying, like, not that there's anything we do about it, but just understand that in 2026, highly likely our rates are going to go up by about 10%.
Hey, Jack, I want to give away some of your money. A Starbucks gift card. All right. So
Yeah,
let's see if we can do this for Andrew Krasinski, because he popped back. He's the first guy to hit me back with answers. So here's what he's texted back to me. So I said I copied the text or the chat that we had gotten earlier, and so thank you for that. And here was the question. Fed announced they're more and more confident about reducing interest rates by approximately 3% next year. Yes, no, when, thoughts. All right. So that was the question. Thank you very much, Kirk. Here's the answer. and I'm going to put the disclosure, because I'm sure Fifth Third is not sanctioning Andrew Krasinski to give his opinion. So just put that caveat on there. All right. So I do think they're getting pressure from financial institutions to do so, but that seems way too aggressive based on what happened in the 70s. Now they're talking about a cut to happen next year, but it would have to be very small, if at all. What's most concerning to me is the fact that over the last 12 months, within 30-day periods, economic prognosticators are changing their viewpoints drastically. And we did talk a little bit about that. That goes to my theory that we are on a brand new paradigm that nobody understands yet. So Andrew Krasinski, he should get a Starbucks card for just being willing to play Squeal of Fortune. So
I am happy to do that, because like I said at the beginning, he doesn't hold back. I mean, he's willing to tell you how it is, whether you agree or disagree with his opinion. So not hedging his bets. But thank you for the disclaimer. I'm sure Fifth Third appreciates that as well. That, those are the views of Andrew, not of the bank necessarily. So
yeah. No, I think let's just call a spade a spade. We caught some heat early on when the COVID, sanitized talking points are being spewed from everybody. Everybody's doing a webinar on the same talking points, but there's no decoding of the gobbledygook. Well, what does that mean? Nobody knew. And we caught some heat for saying, well, we don't know what that means, but here's what we think it means. And we're going to do it in English as much as possible. Well, you guys are putting yourself out there. Yeah, but, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And we're small business owners too. So we're dealing with the same crud that you guys are dealing with. So I think that's the bottom line. We want to keep it kind of straight talk. We'll do, we do have a lawyer on the line with us, but so we're going to, put those caveats, I suppose, but we're in the same boat with you guys. So
yeah, and I think from that standpoint, you kind of come back to, okay, that's all interesting information. What the hell do I do with it? What do I? Okay, economic procrastinators, blah blah blah, not procrastinators, prognosticators.
They are procrastinators too.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think, whether we have a recession or not, I mean, I think generally everybody, is of the consensus opinion that I don't care what they're saying. It doesn't feel like we're growing this much, So with that in mind, what do you do? What do you do about that? What you do about that, not to just, the stuff you should have always been doing. But there's some element of truth to that, in the sense of, what should you do about that? Make sure that your balance sheet is healthy. What is making sure you're balanced? Great advice, Adam. Of course, the CPA would say that. What does that mean? I'm a sales guy, CEO. What that really means is that, you have sufficient working capital. Even better, what does that mean? At least a freaking payroll in the bank in cash. If I'm, start there, just start there, payroll in the bank in cash, try to get that cash balance up to, a month of overhead. Once you've done that, if you want to go farther, that's really for your own benefit, to sleep well at night. But once you do that, that's pretty good starting point. That's kind of number one, payroll in the bank, try to get to 1 month overhead. The second thing to look at too would be, how much debt do I have? And if the answer is, for most companies, I have, the debt that I have, if you look at your balance sheet, it's assets equals liabilities plus equity, assets equals liabilities plus, that's why it's called a balance sheet. The liabilities section is, well, that, that's how much the bank owns of your assets. you know, and if that debt is greater than, you know, call it 50% of your assets, like in other words, like to keep it real simple, assets $1 million, you know, debts, you know, 500, equities 500, you know, that's pretty healthy. You know, you start creeping into assets of $1 million, debts at 800, you know, you're starting to get into the unhealthy zone. So I think, you know, kind of looking at your balance sheet, you know, and somewhere in that kind of 50% to 75% of asset value is really sort of the, you know, healthy, probably could take some more debt on range to, dude, you're at the limit. I mean, even if a bank, even if a gentleman like Andrew would loan you the money, you should consider not taking it. You know, range. I don't care what great idea that you have, you know, to offset it. You know, you might want to consider, you know, not taking it, because then you get into step number 3, which is, okay, let me look at what would happen if hypothetically we were to have a recession. Well, how do I know what would happen? Well, here's your answer. If you've been around since 07 and 08, you got your answer. You went through it. You know, go back and look at what actually happened. If you did not go through 07, 08 because you started afterwards, you know, start asking around. You know, hey, what we see? You know, 07, 08, what we see? Last recession, you know, how'd it feel? You can't really use the pandemic as an example because that was zombie apocalypse. But if you go back to 07, 08, that gives you some guideposts around, I wonder what it felt like. If you don't want to do that, model 10% down. You know, just model if things were 10% down, you know, and I didn't cut my overhead to account for it, what would be the effect? So sales go down 10%, you know, direct product costs go down 10%, meaning like the inventory that I'm buying, that I'm converting into a product, go down 10%. I can't say the labor was variable because those are hourly people that I'm still saying come to the factory 40 hours a week, right? So I can't say that went down. So that stays the same. Overhead, that stays the same. If you end up with a you know, boy, that looks real bad. You know, like I'd run out of money real quick. Okay, now you know. Like now you know that you need to come up with your down 10% game plan. You know, like hey, if I start to, how will I know if I'm starting to be down, and what am I going to do about it if I see it? Once you're done with that, put that baby on the shelf. You know, ready to dust it off as needed, and stop losing sleep about it. Go about your day, because you know what? There's not a damn thing that we can do about it anyway. You know, other than to be prepared. Once you're prepared, like nobody, Gary, last time I checked, nobody got a gold star for preparing twice. You know, like, you know, in other words, like, do you need 7 years in your zombie apocalypse shelter, or would 1 year suffice? You know, for this, for your, like, am I really going to eat MREs for 7 years, or am I going to blow my brains out? Because who would want to eat MREs for 7 years? That's all that I'm saying.
Yeah. So I will transition into the mental health therapy session of kind of some of the things that you brought into the discussion today, which is, you know, all these things that we talk about. It's easy to get mental fatigue, and especially around this time of year when it's holidays and you've been fiscally conservative and doing the things that you know, we've been talking about over the course of time, and, you know, looking at your balance sheet and all those things. Hopefully you are doing those things, but then it's the, well, you know, it's okay to let loose a little bit. And I'm not saying that that's not okay. It's fine. But then it's, you let loose and then that becomes the norm. And then you let loose a little more and that becomes the norm. And then you're like, okay, well, yeah, and you lose a little bit of that financial discipline going into the new year, and that becomes problematic. And then kind of taking that concept into another arena of it's a legal concept, an equitable concept called course of dealing and course of performance. So it is a way of taking something that is maybe contractual in a writing and saying, okay, we're going to modify that based upon course of dealing, which is what was the thought process before the change happened to what was already going on via a contract. And then course of performance is what was done after the contract was signed. And then, the subsequent behavior that might modify what is in the contract, even though, and I know what all of you are thinking, but Jack, we know all of our contracts in the boilerplate on the second to last page say no amendments except in a writing signed by both parties or all parties. Yes, I understand that. So an example of that is, and because we're going through that now, is a bonus that was promised or allegedly promised to a departing employee, a CEO, that based upon it was fine before COVID, they kind of locked down, and then and in writing, and then they kind of loosened up over the past 2 years. And now it's, well, you did that for me in the prior year, so now you've established this course of performance, and so my bonus should be something different than what you paid to me, the measly amount that you paid to me, which is not true. And so you need to maintain the discipline. I know everybody's getting fatigue. This time of year, you're getting fatigue. You're thinking more about, okay, what's going to be under the Christmas tree, what bonuses you are going to give to your employees. I mean, all those things kind of meshing together. I can't believe we're a week away from Thanksgiving. I mean, all those things come to mind, but just, please be mindful now that we're saying it expressly and explicitly to you, to be mindful of the trap of not being mindful of those things that I just said. So free legal advice for the day.
Was that advice?
Oh, shoot. Don't. No, it was not. It was guidance. Woo, boy.
Oh my gosh. Oh man.
Thank you for catching that.
Oh gosh.
A few comments
So,
in the, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at. First of all, Kirk, thank you for citing your source. That's really good. And again, what do these guys know? I mean, I don't know. That would be great. The mortgage industry would stand up and do the happy dance and cheer if a 3% rate cut hit. Those guys have been hurting. And oh man. Yeah. Adam, you need to just read your.
Oh yeah. No, well, so Mullins, who's the senator from Oklahoma, posted a comment saying that, in challenging the UAW president, Sean O'Brien, I think that's his name, Jack.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. To a fight, he said, well, my constituents back in Oklahoma would have wanted me to challenge him to a fight. I'm like, well, I actually, if you did not know this, I am from Oklahoma. My family still lives in Oklahoma. While I have not, and he's a senator, so that's statewide office, while I have not called and polled the people in Edmond, Stillwater, and Blackwell, where my family all lives, I probably could, and I think mortification would be more the reaction versus
go for it.
Yeah, look, we need a little more Tom Cole. Tom Cole's a good dude. That's the other senator from Oklahoma. Or no, I think Tom Cole's in the House. More people like him, not Jim Lankford, maybe their other senator. But yeah, less challenging to a brawl from the dais of the Senate, and more like, win the case on the merits. But anywho.
Yeah. The issue is, all right, so what war did more Americans die in? Civil War.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
That doesn't serve our country well at all. more Americans died in the Civil War or the War of Northern Aggression or the war between the states, and there's nothing civil about war. So anyway, I mean, it's just like, I don't know. COVID has not brought the best out of people, that's for sure. But what can we do about it? Be nice to somebody else, like, even, and if they don't agree with you, well, welcome to the human race. Nobody agrees with all of us on all of our stuff. Find some common ground and focus on that.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So if I could take a short tangent on that, and it is because we're talking about war, but an ask of this group, if you have access to someone with this expertise. But as the guys know, I was trying to locate an individual who is knowledgeable about the Middle East and about different factions and the history of all of that stuff going on over in the Gaza Strip, and the influence of Iran and all of that. And so I reached out to a friend at the FBI here in Charlotte who is in charge of kind of their public relations, and she was very friendly and said, yeah, let me run your request up the flagpole. And she came back and in a very diplomatic way said, we are unable to comply with and assist you with your request. And she doesn't normally talk like that. And the reason why I bring that up is because she is, whatever there is a script on all of this. And so if anyone has access to someone with knowledge, historical and, up-to-date knowledge that would be able to share, because I encounter a lot of people that are ignorant, meaning they're just not knowledgeable. I'm not calling them names. I'm just saying that they just do not know. And most of them will admit to that and say, this is my thoughts on it. Others, despite being ignorant on the topic, will give you their opinion, and they are very opinionated one way or another. And I just think that unless you really know what you're talking about and know the history, you really have no business being so strongly opinionated. And that is my strong opinion, that you should not be strongly opinionated, that if you don't know, because I know people who are on, I don't want to say either side, but their backgrounds are on one side or another, and but are understanding of each other side's perspective. But then there are others that are, there's a lot of stuff going on in this country. There's a lot of stuff going on in this city that we don't necessarily hear about, that is just, hopefully that calms down. But it's going to take all of us to be very open-minded and express our positions, but also understand that there is another side. There is another side of it that is equally valid in that other person's mind. So that's my plea to everyone. And then also my ask, if you know someone that can share insight into that to educate all of us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. So we've got an anonymous attendee that says, my mom was born in Palestine, and dad fought in Israel war in 1948, have family in bunkers in North and South. And yeah, so I'm going to go into a broader topic of something that you said, which was somebody that's got a whole bunch of opinions, but not a lot of fact to back it up. So there is a psychological term for that, and it's called something effect. Does anybody know what that is? Where you have a heightened opinion of your mastery of a subject than what you actually do.
Once you say it, everybody's gonna be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But
yes. Oh, Jack, can you give the Monty Python effect? Yeah, I like that one. But no, that's not right. But Alex got it right. Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the opposite of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, typically somebody is a lot more accomplished and better than they think they are, but they're just overwhelmed by these, fear, feelings of inferiority. But Dunning-Kruger is more of Uncle Rico in in Napoleon Dynamite. So
A lot of visual there. Yeah,
that's a
funny.
visual right there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go back to getting on point. Don't be Uncle Rico. Instead,
Don't be Uncle Rico.
Actually develop a budget for next year, model it out, make sure you've got some health, so that if something bad happens, you can you can handle it. And if it looks like something bad happens, make sure you got a plan for how you're going to deal with it, and then just go about your day and keep on making money.
And I just want to acknowledge the response to reach out to a certain person on potentially someone who's knowledgeable about the situation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. So I'm going to acknowledge that. Thank you very much. Well, this has been a fun group today. And we're not at the end of this hour, but before everybody peels off of here, I want to just hit you with this one challenge. Next week's Thanksgiving, we're off. Hopefully you guys will be too. Enjoy it. But one thing that you can do today and keep Thanksgiving going throughout the rest of your life and every day is just think of one thing that you're thankful for. Just one thing. Think of one person that you're thankful for, and make sure you don't let the day slip away without telling them. Just tell them that you're thankful for them. And there's all kinds of studies about NLP and the whole, what happens in the brain, but it actually does affect and change your brain. So super simple. Another little practical fact that you can take away from this 184th week of live Q&A. So any other thoughts or questions from the gallery? It's a pretty good group today. I'm looking at it and it's a pretty good group. Anything else, Adam, that you can think of as far as, all right, so we are in tax planning season. So, listen, y'all, next week's Thanksgiving. Then basically you got a couple weeks of productivity before the world starts shutting down again for Christmas. So pedal to the metal, or as they say down here in the South, mash the gas. But there's, anything else that you would say from a, end of year tax planning thing that we didn't cover in some of the owner fringe benefits in the last couple of weeks?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think probably the only other thing that we didn't hit on yet, we'd hit on it in earlier discussions, but on the equipment purchases side, you remembering also as parts of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the amount that there's two ways that you can automatically expense things that you buy. Way number one is section 179, which is just hey, if I made money, I can automatically expense an asset that I purchased for tax purposes through 100% depreciation. That's great, and we do that. However, if it won't drive you into a loss, like it just stops at zero in income. So if you didn't make any money, that's off the table for you. If you made $100 grand, but you bought 500 grand in assets, you're only going to get 100 grand. The rest of it carries forward in the future. Well, the other method of rapid depreciation is called bonus depreciation, which doesn't have an income limitation associated with it and is a little bit more flexible in terms of the stuff that you can buy with it. Well, this last year was 100%. This year it's 80%, meaning like you still get to depreciate the assets in the future. It's just the upfront went from 100% to now the upfront is 80%. In 2024, it's 60%. So again, it's not the end of the world, but if you're really thinking about equipment purchases, you're going to get more bang for your buck if you buy it on December 31st, stroke of midnight, than you will January 1st, 2024. So, it makes sense, to consider the acceleration of purchases, because what you'd feel silly about would be like, because even if you don't end up using the whole thing, just like Section 179, it'll carry forward in the future. So versus if you bought it in the next year, you're not going to get as much bang for the buck from an appreciation standpoint. So, that's probably the only thing that we haven't hit on recently is just that rule is changing next year as well. I think probably the only other thing to hit on too is, lobby's still pushing hard to change the R&D tax credit rules to where they go back to being a little bit more favorable to take, but no new update there.
So you saw Matt's question on that. Will raises this question, might not be the best time, but could you comment on cash balance plan pros and cons? Keep you awake. It's a great way to put off taxes.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So let's just start with what is a cash balance plan? So, when you think about retirement plans, like company retirement plans, the one that everybody's always familiar with is a 401k, or an SEP, simplified employee pension plan. 401k is the most common. Yeah, that's where, Jack's deferring money out of his paycheck to go into retirement. And then the company says, hey, Jack, you're awesome. We're going to match a little bit of that for you. And if the company's really awesome, they'll say, and by the way, Jack, the company did really well, so we're going to match even more of it, and share some of the profits with you. So with those plans, a participant like Jack, could get up to about 60 grand or so, and it's round numbers, right? So that's a lot, but if you're still, so if you still are making enough money that you've got some extra cash flow hanging around after that, there's, a Cadillac that exists beyond the nice, fully apportioned Chevy, that is the 401k plan with all the bells and whistles. It's called a cash balance plan, but I don't know why they call it that. They had to come up with a sexy name. It behaves a lot like what we're used to thinking about with a whole life insurance policy, meaning like, hey, if I contribute so much money every year, at some point in the future, using a guaranteed rate of return of call it 6 or 8%, I will receive X amount in retirement payments. So, for example, if I said, okay, look, but Gary says, look, by the time I turn, 67, I want to have accumulated $1 million. I'm willing to contribute for the next 5 years to do that, and then let the money grow. What would I need to do that? The answer would be, you need to do 100 grand a year for the next 5 years. I'm making that up, right? But that's effectively what a cash balance plan does, is you're putting money in, in a way of receiving a future retirement benefit. The difference between it and a whole life policy is that whole life policy not getting a tax deduction. Cash balance plan, I am getting a tax deduction. But for all intents and purposes, they kind of look and smell the same. Another way to think about it is like, it's like an old school pension plan. Like I can't log on, I can't see an account balance, I don't know what it's invested in, but at some point in the future, somebody's going to give me some money, for this thing. The difference is I'm actually putting the money in, myself as I go along. So the difference with that is that, that can be, up to, about 300 grand, if all the demographics are right in terms of what you contribute. So I don't know. I mean, Gary's not the math guy around here. I get that, but Gary could tell you 300 grand is more than 60 grand. So
yes, 5 times more.
Yeah. So where it makes The problem though is that it's like a whole life insurance plan. Like once you sign the contract, you kind of need to fund that amount. And if you want to break the contract, you can, but there's all sorts of penalties associated with it. So it works the best for people that have, a discretionary, because you got to have an extra 300 grand lying around, right? That you don't want to see anymore, that you want a tax deduction for. So you have to have the money available. And then B, that money needs to be consistent, meaning so it works real well in law firms, medical practices, places that have extremely predictable year in, year out discretionary cash flow. I mean, the one that I saw that was the worst, was back in the recession. It was a guy that was a house flipper, was flipping houses. And somebody convinced him that a cash balance plan, like you can just imagine where the story goes. Somebody convinced him that a cash balance plan was a great way to defer taxes. And it's like, sure, if the real estate market is always going to appreciate at 30% a year and you're always going to be flipping houses and have unlimited access to that, maybe, but that did not turn out to be true. Right. Meaning the first thing is look, if your income's like this, not for you. If your income's like that, this is a good plan for you if you got the cash around.
Yeah. Great question, Will.
And I'll throw in a reminder about this and hopefully not sound like a broken record, but just a reminder, because this keeps coming up as well, which is I would ask that as you're going through your year-end kind of review and your new year planning, that you look at your governance documents. If you're an LLC, look at your operating agreement in particular, because we are encountering more and more operating agreements that were drafted for drafted for partnerships, for LLCs taxed as a partnership. And at some point they did an S Corp election, or they were single member LLCs that then brought on a new member thinking, okay, well, no big deal. And the tax returns were adjusted accordingly. So both people got K1s, but the governance document still reads as essentially a single member entity, which would be a sole proprietorship for the most part, or it could have been an S Corp. So please take a look at that. There is, opportunities to fix that. Or if you thought you were an S Corp and you are not, find out that you're not, then you have, the 75 days into the beginning of next year to make that election for 2024, unless things have changed. But I believe that's still the rule. It's, the middle of March, right? Those the first 2.5 months, so 75 days. So just keep that in mind as well.
So here's a question that relates to that, and this came up. Single member LLC, obviously just a pass through. Do they have to do an annual meeting and minutes?
So one of the benefits of not being a corporation is there's less formality related to those things. So I would say that most of our LLCs do not do that. Now, having said that, if there's some big event that occurs, so you put in place a bonus plan or something big, or you're going to take on a loan, well, you'll have the bank is going to make all the owners sign something. So that's not a great example, but something that you want to memorialize that everyone was in agreement about. Or let's say that there's something in the operating agreement that says, if you're going to spend more than 100K on something, then you need to get supermajority consent or unanimous consent, and you want to record that, then you should do that. But it isn't like a corporation where you're supposed to, by statute, have an annual meeting, record minutes, or in the alternative, have consent minutes or consent document that usually it's unanimous consent. In some jurisdictions, it can be majority consent, but that also is governed by the bylaws, usually, or the shareholders agreement of the corporation. So it's a depends. answer, but I went through all of the, the forks in the road for that.
All right, that's good. All right, last call. We're down to 3 minutes before we say lights out for week 184. Week 185 will be in 2 weeks, not next week. Enjoy your family and find something to be thankful for and tell somebody about it.
One thing we should consider, Gary, and I see there's a question in the chat about partnerships moving to sub S, is maybe in December we talk about tax treatment as between the different types of organizations, because there continues to be, and some people are ashamed and very sheepish about, well, I don't know, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it's confusing, because you have the legal aspects, which is, are you a corporation, are you an LLC? And it's like, well, wait a minute, but I see it's 1120S, and that's a corporation return, isn't it? But I'm an LLC. So, a refresher on that, it may be somewhat remedial, but maybe not. And so I think that maybe we should either do that in December or at least the beginning of January.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's do it. So we'll get that teed up for 2 weeks from now. I'm just making notes right now. All right, cool. Good question, Trey. Good to see you on here. Let's see. One other question. Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you too, Joe. It's always good to see you. And thank you, Joe, for reading my book and for giving me really great feedback. I appreciate that. It was encouraging. So thank you. Any last call questions? Thoughts? Hearing none? Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe.
You guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Let's see you. Bye.